There are times when I just sit back and I just think, man, what could I have done differently to turn my life around? What could I have done early enough to prevent high blood pressure, high cholesterol, pre-diabetes, and eventually type 2 diabetes? And what if I told you I actually had some warning signs? A doctor confirmed that I had some issues going on. My health was heading in the wrong direction, folks, but I didn't do enough about it. I don't know where you are in your health journey, but you know what? For years, I kept telling myself that, I'll get to it. I'll change my diet, every few months or whatnot. I started exercising when things started to slow down. You know how we all do. I would go to the doctors only when something was going on. And then something actually did go wrong, folks. Today, I want to share something personal with you. I want to share with you my personal timeline, my journey, my regrets, some things I wish I had done differently. Because if my story can even help one person stop waiting and stop wasting time and stop wasting money, then this episode is worth everything. So stick around to hear the rest of today's episode, my friend. Let's go. Be sure to visit the website at www.beatingdiabetieslifestyle.com for access to free resources and other information that will help you along your journey. If you would like to submit a question or a comment about the show or to learn more about the Beating Diabetes Lifestyle, you can always email me at hello@beatingdiabetieslifestyle.com. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Welcome to the Beating Diabetes Lifestyle Podcast with me, your host, Oscar Camejo, helping diabetics make lifestyle changes to reverse type 2 diabetes. Now, if this is your first time here, hey, welcome to the show. If you've been rolling with me for any length of time, you already know the deal. Thank you so much. Whether you're in Europe, Asia, Africa, or right here in the US, I really want to say thank you so much. Everybody, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. If this episode speaks to you in any kind of way, tell somebody about it. You may be the reason that your family member or someone that you know finally takes that first step towards their health journey and turning things around. Man, I get comments and likes from all over the world on my TikTok channel, on my Facebook, Instagram, and it just made me think that, you know what, I so appreciate you guys. So again, thank you. Now, we've been working through a lifestyle behavior series together. We've been talking about sugary drinks, ultra-processed foods, sleep deprivation, chronic stress, emotional eating, a whole bunch of stuff. And you know what? We're going to get back to some of that. But today, I want to step outside the series for a quick moment because I believe that we need to have a real talk. I think it's time for us to really get down to the nuts and bolts of, what's really going on in our lives. Sometimes we live in regret. There's some things that we wish we had done sooner. That's why this episode is for anyone who knows they need to make changes now. But, maybe they keep putting it off. If that's you, I need you to stick around. I need you to stay with me. When I was in my 30s, I wasn't thinking about diabetes at all. I wasn't thinking about blood pressure, high cholesterol, any of that. I wasn't thinking about back pain because I wasn't having any. I was living my life. I was living my best life. I was working, taking care of my family. I was getting through the day. But you know what? When it came to my health, I put that on the back burner. I was sleeping late at night, every night, eating whatever I wanted. And you know what? Then I started to creep into my mid-40s and I started noticing some things. You know what I'm saying? The aches and the pains. Not anything dramatic, but just some small things. I remember putting on my socks one day and just felt this sharp pain in my back. I'm like, man, what's going on? Thinking back to that time, man, I wish I had been paying attention. But then now fast forward to 2018, I got a diagnosis, pre-diabetes. Man, my A1C turned out to be 7%. And I'm like, what? I'm like, that's crazy. Pre-diabetes, I didn't even know what that was about. But you know what, to be honest, I was like, well, that's not real diabetes yet. So I have some time, right? Or so I thought. Folks, I did not have time. And by the summer, actually it was August 2020, in the height of the pandemic, my glucose went up to 420 milligrams per deciliter, folks. That was high. My A1C went up to 12%, from 7 to 12%. My triglycerides ended up being 495. And then I ended up having to be on insulin. I ended up in the hospital, folks. Can you believe it? That was my crisis point. I ended up in the hospital in my mid 40s. That was a moment I couldn't ignore anymore. I could not ignore what was happening. All I kept thinking was, man, why did I wait so long? And you know what? I know they say don't live in regret, but you know what? There's some things that I wish I had done differently that I kind of regret, because I spent a lot of time, a lot of money. I had headaches, having to deal with stress and all this stuff. So here's a big idea for today, folks. All those warning signs, all those signals, we can't take those as just being something small. Those warning signs are your window. It's your window into what's actually going on. And folks, in my situation, the biggest mistake I made was treating a warning sign like it was just a suggestion. Going to the doctor and they're giving you suggestions and it's like, oh, okay, well, I'll see. I had a real warning in 2018. Yeah, pre-diabetes. And I treated it, though it was like a suggestion. But then 2 years later, I ended up on insulin and having to take insulin injections. Man, I don't want to have to repeat my story, but I need you to understand that we can't keep avoiding the inevitable. You need to understand what I missed, when I missed it, how I missed it, and what you can do about it. Because you know what? I don't want you to repeat the same mistakes that I made. To be honest, they say experience is the best teacher. Well, I hope my experience and what I went through can help you or help your loved ones to make some changes and really reconsider maybe how you're living your life. That doesn't mean you are a bad person. Maybe just some habits that you need to change. So here's some 9 things that I wish I had done differently. I want to walk you through these 9 things so that you can clearly understand that I can relate to what maybe you're going through right now. Again, these are 9 things I wish I had done. I'm not trying to beat myself up or make you or myself feel bad, because we beat ourselves up enough, right? I just need to give you this list. So number 1, I wish I had taken my health serious enough in my 30s and 40s. Yeah, when I was younger, I thought I had time, folks. And in one sense, yes, I did. But it was also setting some bad habit patterns. I was dealing with some patterns that I wasn't really cognizant of. What we eat in our 30s actually matters. How much we move in our 30s matters. Whether you go to the doctor in your 30s, yeah, it matters. Because by the time, I hit my 40s, my health started to decline, and I didn't even realize it. I didn't realize what was coming. I didn't see it coming because I was not paying attention. Now, you may not be in your 30s, right? You may be in your 40s. And this is a perfect opportunity for you to hear me loud and clear. Folks, I get it. If you are in your 40s right now, or even in your 50s, it's not too late for you to make some changes. You know what? If you know someone who's in their 40s or 30s, this is a good opportunity for them to make some changes as well. Now, number 2, I wish I had focused on my fitness and actually stuck with it. Now, here's what I want to be clear about. I'm not talking about spending 4 hours in the gym. No, I'm not talking about an intense program that costs a lot of money or even having a perfect routine. I'm talking about consistency when it comes to your fitness and your physical health. When we move our body regularly, that makes a big difference. I'm talking about building a fitness lifestyle before things go bad. Because here's the truth. The foundation I could have built in my 30s and in my early 40s would have made a big difference. It would have made everything that came later much easier to handle and manage. Now, folks, when it comes to fitness, Oscar's not saying go to the extreme. You just have to show up. Now, let's move on to number 3. I wish I had learned the value of strength training a lot earlier. I'm not talking about being muscle bound, but strength training is a big one, folks. And I don't think enough people talk about strength training enough. Ladies may think, oh, I don't want to build muscle. But you know what? Muscle is not just about looking a certain way. Muscle is about being metabolically active. And it's about building strength and maintaining your strength, especially as we get older. The more muscle you have, the better your body can handle blood sugar, folks. That's the reality. The better your metabolism functions. And here's the thing. After a certain age, if you're not actively working to preserve your muscle, guess what's going to happen, folks? I have an entire episode about it. You're going to start losing muscle. And losing muscle, that's not good, folks. We don't need to be losing muscle. A lot of people look frail, even though they may be thin, but they're frail because their muscles haven't worked on their strength. Wish I had understood this early on, because strength training is not optional for people managing their metabolic health. At least it shouldn't be. It should be essential. So that's why, let's move on to number 4. I wish I had learned the benefits of eating healthy, because you know what? You can't out-exercise a poor diet. I'm not talking about rules. I'm not talking about a diet plan. I'm talking about focusing on the benefits of eating healthy. When you understand what food actually does inside your body, when you understand that what you eat either feeds your health or feeds your disease, it changes how you see food, folks. I spent years eating whatever was convenient. We all do that. You know what I'm saying? We don't feel like cooking, so what do? We pick up something that's cheap. We go to the fast food line and we pick up whatever, right? Because that's what we're used to. I was in that same situation. I wasn't thinking about how any of that food was affecting my blood pressure, my blood sugar, none of that. That was furthest from my mind. Nobody sat me down and explained it to me in plain English. I can't blame anybody. That was just me. And that's a part of why this episode and this podcast even exists. So number 5, I wish I had a better attitude about drinking water. I used to hate drinking water, folks, unless I was thirsty. I know that sounds simple, but that's the kind of the point, right? It's not that I was a water drinker. No, I was not a drinker of water at all. I drank other things like soda, sugary drinks like sweet tea, lemonade mixed with sweet tea, power. What are these energy drinks? I used to drink all of that stuff, but I avoided water unless I was thirsty. Water is not complicated and doesn't have to be. Water is not expensive. It doesn't have to be. Water is not exciting. I get it, but it does matter what you do with your body and what you put in your body. I wish I had made drinking water a priority. Now I love drinking water. Water is not about punishing yourself. It's about habits, right? It's about giving your body what it needs. Now, number 6, I wish I had made my doctor visits a priority. This one thing hits different for me because a lot of us, we treat the doctor the same way I did. We don't go unless something is wrong, especially the guys. It's not weak. It's not a sign of weakness to go to the doctor. We don't need to be reactive. We need to be proactive. Waiting until something hurts, then go to the doctor. We feel better, but then we wait again instead of making it a daily routine. The conditions that lead to type 2 diabetes don't always feel bad at first. Diabetes is one of those quiet diseases that can creep up on you. And that's why this mentality of just waiting can be very dangerous. Folks, we need to have regular checkups. We need to catch things early. And early is when you still have the most opportunity to turn things around. I wish I had understood this back then. I would not have procrastinated on my health. I would not have procrastinated on all of these things that I'm telling you about. Okay, number 7. I wish I had taken my pre-diabetes diagnosis seriously back then, back in 2018. This one is probably the hardest for me to say right now, because when I got that diagnosis back in 2018, I had a real opportunity, folks. And honestly, I missed that opportunity. Pre-diabetes is not the same as type 2 diabetes, full-blown type 2 diabetes. Pre-diabetes is actually your body's way of saying, hey, I'm struggling, help me out here. Again, folks, pre-diabetes is simply a warning. It's not a sentence. It's not a life sentence. I made some changes, but not wholesale changes. I didn't make the kind of changes that were going to stop what was coming next, and that's full-blown type 2 diabetes. So things kept getting worse. Things kept progressing in the wrong direction. Because again, by 2020, I was in full crisis mode, ended up in the hospital. I'm saying it because you might be where I was in 2018. You may be dealing with this situation right now. And if you are dealing with prediabetes, this is your moment. Now, number 8, I wish I hadn't been so focused on the scale and my weight, because when I started making changes, the scale became everything to me. Every single day, I step on, check my numbers, judge the whole effort and all the stuff that I was doing based on what number was on that scale. And folks, that became a trap for me. And here's what the scale doesn't tell you. It didn't tell me, and I know it's not telling you. It doesn't tell you your blood sugar is improving. It doesn't tell you that. It just tells you a number, and we make judgments based on that. It doesn't tell you that you're building muscle. It doesn't tell you that. It doesn't tell you that your energy is coming back or your inflammation is going down. The scale is not designed to do that. It's just telling you what your weight is. So accept it for what it is, but don't dwell on the scale. Trust me, you don't need to be dwelling on the scale, because progress is not always visible on the scale, but it is real. Progress is what we're focusing on, folks. And when you let the scale run your motivation, you set yourself up for frustration. So focus on the habits, focus on the labs, yeah? Focus on how you actually feel. The scale is just one data point, so don't let it be the only point. Now let's move on to number 9. I wish I hadn't stressed myself out so much about my numbers. Yeah, not just the scale, but just even my A1C. And this actually connects to number 8 that we just dealt with. When I was managing my type 2 diabetes in my management phase, I put so much mental energy stressing out about my A1C. I was nervous. I was nervous about my glucose reading. I was nervous and scared about what was going on with the scale. Every day, just obsessing. And you know what? Here's what I learned. Stress is not neutral when you have type 2 diabetes. Chronic stress raises your cortisol, and cortisol raises your blood sugar. I have an entire podcast episode dedicated to stress and what's going on in your body when you are dealing with chronic stress. I get it, folks. The numbers matter. You should know your numbers. You should track your numbers. You should be in conversation with your doctor or your endocrinologist about what's going on. But when it comes to overthinking and being overly anxious every day, folks, that's actually working against you. So stop obsessing over your numbers. Manage your numbers. Don't let them manage you. Now, folks, here's what the cycle looks like when you're not paying attention. You get a warning sign. You don't act, and the condition gets worse. And now you're dealing with something much bigger than you would have if you would have just simply caught it earlier. Because now you're tired. You're overwhelmed. You might be on medication, and you're frustrated. And now you're starting to feel like you're climbing this mountain instead of taking a walk, right? That's a cycle that I want to help you break today, folks. Now, I have some research that I want to share with you real quick. According to the CDC, more than 96 million American adults have prediabetes, and more than 80% of them don't know they even have it. That means the majority of people with a warning sign don't even know there is a warning sign. Now, let me say that again. More than 80% of people with prediabetes have no idea they even have it. And the ones who do, many of them, like me at the time, don't act fast enough. So, folks, I don't need you to be in that number. It's not too late. I was on insulin in 2020, but then by April 2022, I was completely off insulin. And by mid 2022, I was off all medications completely. My doctor cleared me. Folks, I know it's a struggle for a lot of you, right? And you may be worried. You may be dealing with all kinds of things, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, some of the other markers, right? But you know what? In March of 2024, I completed an ultra marathon. Now, that was a big thing for me. My A1C right now ended up being below 6.0. My triglycerides, healthy, normal. My LDL, normal. My doctor was like, hey, you're doing great. I want you to keep doing what you're doing. I'm sharing my success because I want you to know that your body is also resilient. Your body can respond in a positive way. Your body can recover, but you have to give it something to work with. And that starts with a decision. The same decision I finally made in 2020. I wanted to be healthy. And when I had asked my doctor, how long am I going to end up being on medication? When he told me for the rest of my life, I was like, no, I need to turn things around. So you don't have to wait for a crisis to make that decision to turn things around. You can make it right now, folks. So let's talk about what you can actually do right now. Not next month, not after the holidays, not after this summer break or what have you. I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about your battle plan. I talk a lot on this podcast about having a plan, having a battle plan, because we're going to war, folks. And we need to make sure that we war against the mentality that things are just going to stay the same when it comes to our health. We can turn things around. So, battle plan, step number 1, schedule your doctor visit. Not when you feel bad, not when something goes wrong. I mean, this week, get your labs done. Find out what's going on with your numbers. Know your numbers. Understand your numbers. You can't manage what you don't measure. So get your lab work done. Talk to your doctor. Find out what's going on in your body and pay attention. Ask questions about what's going on with your body. So step number 2, know your numbers. Ask your doctor, what does it mean by triglycerides? What's going on with your high blood pressure? Write all of that stuff down. Track your numbers over time. These numbers are telling you a story about your health. And you need to be reading that story on a regular basis so that you know what's going on. Again, get a journal, write that stuff down. If you have to dictate it in your phone, write it down. Step number 3, start with one food that you can swap out. I'm not talking about an entire overhaul, not a complete diet change, just one thing to swap. Trade that soda, for water. We talked about water earlier. Swap one thing, because that one thing can lead to 2. Then 2 things that you swap can lead to something else. And then before you know it, those lifestyle habits that you are breaking are going to improve. You're going to take on new habits. So step number 4, move your body. Now, I don't care if it's a 10-minute walk around the block after you have your dinner. Start somewhere. Movement is one of the most powerful tools you have to control your blood sugar. So why not use it? It doesn't cost you anything to walk. It doesn't cost you anything to move better. I'm not talking about going into the gym and being in the gym for 2-3 hours. Take 10 minutes a day, and that'll lead to 30 minutes. You understand what I'm saying? So step number 5, tell somebody what you're working on. Having the support of your family and friends, it can go a long way. I wish I had that support system when I was going through my crisis back in the day. Because you know what? Accountability changes everything. Have enough courage, have enough confidence to tell them what's going on. You're not meant to go through this alone, folks. Trust me. And sometimes you may be kind of anxious about telling your loved ones because you don't want your spouse or your girlfriend or your husband to feel like, you're a failure or you're weak or whatever. Folks, it's important for you to lean on those around you, because you know what? I wish I had done more, and I wish I had done it sooner, but I can't go back. Neither can you. Our support systems matter, but if you don't have one, that's okay. You can work towards that. We can start changing our health around today. If you want better health, you got to start now. You want to get off medication? Hey, my friend, you have to start now. You want to be around for your kids, your grandkids, the people who need you? You need to start now. Don't wait for the crisis to scare you into making changes. Your health is worth more than that, folks. You are worth more than that. If you're struggling with type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol right now, and maybe you haven't really taken things seriously, I want you to take things seriously starting now. You know what? Thank you for being here today. Thank you for trusting me with your time. And if this episode hit home in any kind of way, like I said before, please share it and tell somebody about it. Now, let's get out there and put this stuff into action. And as always, remember, stay focused, keep moving, never go back, leap forward, bounce back because you can, my friend. And above all else, trust God. You got this. I believe in you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Beating Diabetes Lifestyle Podcast with Oscar Camejo. We hope you enjoyed this episode. As a reminder, this podcast is intended for motivational and educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional care by a physician or other healthcare professional or qualified fitness instructor. This podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or professional advice or services. If you're looking for help on your journey, seek a qualified medical practitioner. It's important that you utilize someone who is a trained, licensed healthcare professional who can help you on your journey toward good health.